Every time SHEDEUR Sanders hit the turf without a whistle, the NFL sent a message. By week 10, fans noticed it. By week 15, analysts were compiling reels. And yet, no flags. Nothing. Until the final game of the season, when Cedric Johnson's late hit finally triggered a $5,000 fine. Not in real time, but days later, buried in post-game paperwork. That fine wasn't about Johnson. It was about Sanders, and about a league that let a young quarterback absorb game-altering punishment without protection or penalty. When nearly identical hits on veterans drew instant laundry, Sanders got silence. That silence echoed for 17 weeks. Now it doesn't. The fine, minor in dollars, but massive in implication, reframed Sanders' season. It forces the league and its audiences to stop measuring him against fantasy expectations and start recognizing the conditions he endured.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
No head coach, no structure, no support. He earned victories anyway. And in doing so, he exposed a flaw not just in officiating, but in the NFL's entire developmental system. The question is no longer whether Sanders belongs. It's whether the Browns will finally build around him, or waste what he's already proven. For months, the hits kept coming. No flags. No outrage. No accountability. Just SHEDEUR Sanders, rookie quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, getting thrown to the turf over and over again while the league watched in silence. But finally, after 18 brutal weeks, someone upstairs decided to blink. It happened quietly. No press conference. No headlines. Just a fine. $5,000. Issued to Bengals defender Cedric Johnson for a late hit on Sanders in Week 18. Not during the game. Not when it could have actually made a difference. After. Buried in the NFL's post-game accountability report like a whisper confession. But that fine? It meant everything. Because for the first time, the league officially acknowledged what fans, players, and analysts had been screaming all season long. Sanders was taking punishment that wasn't being called. And the hits weren't just physical. They were systemic. That $5,000 wasn't about the money. It was about the process. It had to go through multiple levels of internal review, culminating in approval from none other than Commissioner Roger Goodell's office. That kind of top-down validation doesn't happen for just any hit. The league didn't hand this one out casually. They looked at the tape, looked at the context, and agreed. It crossed a line. Now ask yourself, if that hit was bad enough to warrant league-level discipline after the fact, what does that say about everything that came before it? About the countless other hits that went unflagged, unreviewed, and unpunished? Because the context matters. Sanders didn't just have a rough season. He was dropped into chaos. The Browns had no permanent head coach. Their offensive schemes shifted from week to week like a broken playlist on shuffle. And the offensive line? Barely functional. Protection was a suggestion, not a guarantee. Yet through all of that, Sanders showed up. Week after week. He held his composure, protected the ball, and led the team to their first back-to-back wins all season. And still, instead of praise, he was met with suspicion. His name carried more baggage than benefit. Every mistake was overanalyzed, every decision second-guessed. And the contrast was glaring. Veteran quarterbacks took softer hits and got instant flags. But when Sanders got crushed after the whistle, nothing. The lack of consistency wasn't just frustrating, it was dangerous. And when you look at it across the season, it starts to feel less like bad luck and more like a pattern. The fine against Johnson broke that silence. It wasn't just about that one play. It cracked the door open on all the others. The fact that it required Goodell's office to sign off suggests the league knew the weight of what they were doing. This wasn't routine. It was a statement. But why did it take so long? That question is still hanging in the air. Because the timing, right after the season ended, only underlines how broken the system is. The NFL can fine players after games, but that does nothing to protect quarterbacks in real time. There's no deterrent, no on-field consequences. And for someone like Sanders, already playing under relentless pressure, That silence from the officials might as well have been permission. The NFL's delayed reaction doesn't just reflect poorly on officiating. It raises broader questions about who gets protected and why. Is quarterback safety only prioritized when the QB fits a certain mold, plays for a high-profile team, has a certain media-friendly narrative? Because in Sanders' case, none of that was working in his favor. And it showed. The hits piled up, the flags didn't come, and the narratives took hold. People weren't talking about his resilience or composure. They were fixated on his footwork, his release time, his pedigree. It was as if surviving wasn't enough. He had to be flawless while getting hit illegally. This fine, quiet as it was, disrupts that narrative. It forces a re-evaluation. If the league agrees that one hit on Sanders broke the rules, it means others might have, too. And that means the whole framework of criticism around his season starts to look shaky. Media outlets love to highlight his flaws. But where was the coverage of the hits? The blown protections? The fact that he was operating without a consistent offensive structure or even a stable coaching staff. Those details weren't convenient. They didn't fit the storyline. But the truth is, Sanders played under conditions that would have buried most rookies. And he still managed to keep the offense alive, protect the football, and pull off wins when it mattered most. This changes the stakes for Cleveland. Because now, they can't pretend they don't know. The league itself has said, yes, he was hit illegally. That acknowledgement, even if late and understated, shifts the conversation from opinion to documented fact. It forces the front office to look at what Sanders did accomplish, not just what he didn't. And with rumors flying about John Harbaugh potentially joining the Browns, the weight of that validation gets even heavier. Harbaugh isn't known for gambling on unproven quarterbacks. He's known for building systems, developing talent, and turning stability into success. If he sees something in Sanders worth building around, that's not a sentimental choice. It's a professional endorsement. It means that behind the messy stats and unfair criticism, there's real value. Harbaugh's possible arrival could signal a major shift in how the Browns approach quarterback development. For a franchise that spent years cycling through quarterbacks like rental cars, this is their chance to commit, to stop reacting and start building. Because the alternative? It's more of the same. Blame the quarterback, tear down the system, reset. But if they do that with Sanders, they risk throwing away one of the most battle-tested rookies in recent memory. A guy who's already proven he can perform under pressure most young players never face. The NFL's fine doesn't undo a season of missed calls. It doesn't erase the bruises or the silence from the refs. But it does mark a turning point. It puts the league stamp on what Sanders endured. And it demands that the Browns take a long, honest look at the player they have, before they lose him to the same cycle that's failed so many others. This is bigger than just a fine. It's about what that fine means. It's about fairness. It's about recognition. And it's about finally confronting the uncomfortable truth that some players have to work twice as hard to get half the benefit of the doubt. SHEDEUR Sanders didn't get protected. He got punished by defenders, by officials, and by the narrative. And still, he stood tall in the chaos and kept going. Now the league has finally said, that wasn't okay. So the question becomes, what are the Browns going to do about it? Let us know what you think. Did the NFL wait too long to step in? Should the Browns build around Sanders instead of starting over? And how much weight does that fine really carry now that the season's in the books? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you think quarterbacks deserve consistent protection. And don't forget to subscribe for more real talk on everything the league doesn't want to admit. Because sometimes the biggest story of the season doesn't come from the scoreboard. It comes from what the league finally couldn't ignore. And now that they have acknowledged it, what's the next move? Because here's the reality. A fine after Week 18 doesn't help SHEDEUR Sanders walk any easier on Monday morning. It doesn't rewind the season and give back the yards stolen by uncalled late hits. It doesn't give him the flags that would have extended drives or the momentum swings that could have turned losses into wins. What it does, quietly, reluctantly, is say, you were right. You were getting hit illegally. And we didn't stop it. That sentence alone should shake the foundation of any front office paying attention. Let's be very clear. The NFL doesn't admit fault unless it absolutely has to. So the fact that this fine was issued at all, approved at the highest level through Commissioner Roger Goodell's office, means it wasn't just a formality. It was the league covering itself. It was the NFL trying to correct, in hindsight, what it didn't have the presence, or will, to correct in the moment. And when you step back and consider what Sanders was up against, the story changes completely. This is a quarterback who came into one of the most dysfunctional team environments in the league. No permanent head coach, no identity, no rhythm. The play calling was all over the place. The offensive line was leaking pressure like a busted pipe, and leadership above him was unstable at best. There was no quarterback whisperer, no long-term plan, just chaos. Most rookies get developed. SHEDEUR got deployed. He was put out there and told to figure it out, under pressure, under scrutiny, and under the weight of a name that made him a target before he even threw his first NFL pass. And while he was out there taking real punishment on the field, the media was doing the same off it. Every missed read? Blown up. Every sack? Blamed on him. Every win? Downplayed. It wasn't just that he was criticized. It was that he was scrutinized differently. Not for how he played, but for who he was and where he came from. That scrutiny ignored the context. It ignored the conditions. It ignored the fact that identical hits on more established QBs were drawing 15-yard penalties and protective outrage from broadcasters and fans alike, while Sanders was left on the ground with nothing but silence and grass stains. The Week 18 hit wasn't some fluke. It was the latest example of what had been happening all season long. And the NFL's post-game fine wasn't just a punishment for Cedric Johnson. It was a delayed admission of everything that came before it. It was a reluctant nod that maybe, just maybe, SHEDEUR wasn't being paranoid. Maybe the flag should have come. And that makes the lack of real-time officiating even harder to defend. If the hit was late enough to be fined, why wasn't it flagged in the moment? What's the value of a league that claims to protect its quarterbacks, its most valuable assets, if those protections are only available after the fact, when the damage is already done? That's the flaw in the system. A post-game fine doesn't help a quarterback in the pocket. It doesn't make defenders hesitate. It doesn't influence momentum. Real-time enforcement is what keeps players safe. And when that doesn't happen, the burden falls on players like Sanders to survive hits they should have been shielded from. It's no coincidence this fine didn't come until after the season ended. That's when the league has the luxury to admit its mistakes, when the games don't count, when the playoff picture is set, when accountability is no longer urgent. And it's not like this was publicized. The NFL didn't tweet about it. There was no statement, no talking head on league-owned media breaking it down. They buried it. Because if they talked about it, they'd have to admit it reflects on the entire season, not just that one play. They'd have to admit they failed a rookie quarterback who was already doing more than most veterans would be asked to do. And here's where the Browns come in. They've seen this story play out before. The endless quarterback carousel, the constant resets, the organizational shrug every time a young QB struggles, as if the environment had nothing to do with it. But now, they don't get to pretend they don't know, because the NFL's own disciplinary process has given them the receipts. If SHEDEUR Sanders was being hit unfairly, and the league says he was, then the Browns have a responsibility to do more than just protect him moving forward. They have to rebuild around him. This isn't a raw prospect who needs to be toughened up. This is a player who's already been toughened by the system. He survived 18 weeks of punishment, silence, and criticism, and still showed signs of composure, growth, and leadership. You don't throw that out. You build on it. And if the John Harbaugh rumors are real, that could be the turning point. Because Harbaugh doesn't just bring coaching experience. He brings culture, stability, discipline, and most importantly, a track record of developing quarterbacks who are overlooked, undervalued, or underestimated. If Harbaugh sees something in Sanders that says more than any stat line, it means he sees a foundation, a player who, despite a year from hell, still has the tools and the mentality to be something special. And that's the word people haven't been using enough when talking about Sanders this season. Resilient. Not flashy. Not perfect. But resilient. And that matters a lot more than fans realize. Because what's harder? Succeeding in a system designed to help you, or keeping it together in a system that's falling apart around you? SHEDEUR did the latter. He took the hits, took the heat, and somehow stayed upright. That's not just rookie effort. That's future franchise toughness. So what does the fine mean now? It means the conversation has changed. No more hypotheticals. No more, maybe the hits weren't that bad. The league has weighed in, and their verdict is clear. At least one of those hits crossed the line. And by extension, others probably did too. And suddenly, all the people who dismissed the complaints about officiating, they're quiet now. The tape hasn't changed. The stats haven't changed. But the interpretation of them has. Because now we have context. We have validation. And we have confirmation that Sanders played through more than just growing pains. He played through negligence. Now the spotlight shifts to the Browns. What are they going to do with this information? Go back to square one, draft another quarterback, start another cycle? Or admit they've already got something worth investing in? Something tougher than it looks on paper? The conversation is just getting louder. Because once the NFL puts their stamp on something, even quietly, the rest of the league has no choice but to pay attention. And now, every team executive, every head coach, every coordinator who watched SHEDEUR Sanders get tossed around like a crash test dummy all year, without protection, is suddenly asking the same thing. How did it take this long? And what else did we miss? This is the type of moment that redefines a narrative. Not because of the dollar amount. $5,000 is nothing. It's the acknowledgement that's everything. It means every unflagged hit Sanders took throughout the season now carries a different weight. Every questionable moment that was shrugged off in real time now looks like part of a pattern. A pattern the league finally, begrudgingly, admitted existed. And it cuts deep. Because we're not just talking about one bad call. We're talking about 18 weeks of exposure, physical, mental, reputational. A young quarterback, making his NFL debut under some of the worst conditions imaginable, was left out to dry by the system that's supposed to support its players. And for what? Because he wasn't a media darling? Because his last name came with baggage? Because his team wasn't playoff bound? Ask yourself. If SHEDEUR Sanders had been drafted by the 49ers or the Eagles or the Cowboys, would those hits have gone uncalled? Would there have been the same silence? Would the league have waited until the season was over to finally say, okay, yeah, that one was over the line? Highly doubtful. And that's the deeper issue. The NFL loves to push a narrative of parity, of fairness, that every team and every player gets the same treatment. But this season told a different story. One where rookie quarterbacks on struggling teams are treated like they're disposable. Where protections aren't applied evenly. Where you're only as safe as your jersey's brand value. Sanders didn't have the safety net of a polished system or a well-oiled franchise. He had a team in transition, a rotating coaching staff, a game plan that seemed to change depending on which way the wind was blowing. And in spite of all that, in spite of it, he never cracked. Never made excuses. Never lashed out. That alone should have earned him more respect than he got. Instead, he became a lightning rod for criticism. His name was easy to latch onto. His background made him a story before he ever touched the field. So when he didn't light it up in week 1 or throw for 400 yards by week 3, people pounced. Never mind the context. Never mind the dysfunction surrounding him. For a lot of critics, Sanders became a convenient scapegoat for a team with deeper problems. But then came the shift. It wasn't huge. It wasn't loud. But it was enough. Back-to-back wins. Controlled performances. Smart decisions. No turnovers. You could see the wheels turning, not just in Sanders' head, but in the public conversation. He wasn't failing. He was surviving. He was adapting. He was leading a team in disarray and finding a way to not lose, which, given the Browns' situation, was actually a massive accomplishment. And now that the NFL has confirmed in black and white that at least one of the hits he took was out of bounds, It reframes the entire season. Because now analysts who blamed Sanders for every sack have to factor in missed flags. Now, fans who dismissed him as another overhyped rookie have to consider what he did with less than nothing around him. And now, decision-makers in Cleveland can't ignore the fact that their quarterback wasn't just underperforming. He was underprotected. This changes how we measure success. Because when you strip away the expectations and start looking at circumstances, Sanders' rookie year starts to look less like a failure and more like a case study in how tough a player has to be just to survive in the NFL when everything is working against them. And here's the part that matters going forward. Now that survival has been validated, it has to be built upon. The Browns can't afford to repeat their old habits. They've cycled through quarterbacks like it's a yearly ritual, blaming each one for systemic issues they refuse to fix. But this time, they have something different. They have a quarterback who's already been through the storm, who's taken the hits, literally and figuratively, and still found a way to carry himself like a professional. If the Browns truly want to turn a corner, this is their moment, especially with someone like John Harbaugh potentially stepping in. Because Harbaugh doesn't babysit quarterbacks, he develops them. He creates systems that bring out their strengths, cover their weaknesses, and prioritize protection. He's the kind of coach who sees the whole board. If he believes Sanders is worth building around, that's a sign not just of confidence, but of vision. That's the kind of vision the Browns have lacked for years. Harbaugh's possible arrival signals that maybe, just maybe, this time will be different. That instead of throwing another young quarterback into the fire and blaming them when things go wrong, the organization might finally be ready to build a foundation. Because here's what the find didn't say, but clearly implied. SHEDEUR Sanders wasn't the problem. He was a symptom of a bigger problem. And once that becomes clear, the smart move isn't to cut bait. It's to fix the environment. Get the right coach. Stabilize the locker room. Invest in the offensive line. Build a scheme that plays to your quarterback's strengths instead of exposing his weaknesses. That's what turns survival into success. But here's the catch. The clock is ticking. The NFL is ruthless. The media narrative is always ready to pivot. If the Browns don't act on this moment, don't seize the opportunity to learn from this season, they risk wasting a quarterback who already proved he can handle adversity that most players never face. The difference now is that there's evidence. It's not just speculation anymore. The league admitted through action that Sanders had been subjected to hits that should have drawn flags. That validation isn't just symbolic, it's strategic. It gives the Browns permission to stop apologizing for their quarterback and start investing in him. So what's it going to be? Start from scratch, again, with another rookie? Or finally acknowledge what's been sitting in front of them for 18 weeks? A quarterback who never asked for sympathy, never played the victim, and still stood tall while the system failed him? That decision could define the next 5 years of Browns football, maybe longer. If they choose right, they're not just betting on SHEDEUR Sanders. They're betting on a culture shift, on accountability, on learning from failure instead of repeating it. Because SHEDEUR already showed us what accountability looks like. He took it on the chin, literally and figuratively, for an entire season. The league's fine may have come late, but it confirmed what he'd already proved with his actions. He belonged. Now, it's up to the franchise to catch up. And if you've stuck with us through this breakdown, drop your thoughts in the comments. What does the fine really mean for Sanders' future? Should Cleveland commit to him now that the league has confirmed what fans have been saying all season? And what does it say about the NFL system that justice only comes when the games are over? Like if you think the league needs to take real-time protection more seriously. Share if you've been calling this out since week 1. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more unfiltered takes on the stories the NFL won't put in their highlight reels. Because when the league stays quiet, we get louder.